Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking a truly fundamental exploration, a deep dive into the very nature of consciousness itself.
Yeah,
We're sifting through a stack of psychological research that maps the entire mental landscape, really. From the hyper-focused states you experience every day,
mm,
to the involuntary cycles that govern your existence,
mm,
and even how we intentionally or, chemically alter reality.
that's right. Our mission today is, well, to give you a comprehensive tour of the states of awareness you move through. We'll be extracting key insights about attention,
Yeah.
the art science behind why sleep is just, well, non-negotiable,
Right.
the biological machinery running your internal clock, and the profound power of psychoactive chemistry. This material hopefully gives you a shortcut to understanding the mechanics of your own mind.
Our journey is structured around the theme of control. First, we look at the states where you exert maximum voluntary control your attention.
Okay.
Then we look at the ultimate loss of voluntary control, sleep, and dreaming.
Big shift there.
Yeah. And finally, we analyze the intentional attempts to manipulate that state, whether through contemplation or chemistry. We're revealing the mechanics behind why, say, a quick scroll on your phone might make you miss something right in front of you,
Ah, yes.
and what that paradoxical state of dreaming is actually protecting you from. So let's unpack this, starting with how the brain handles the massive influx of information while we're awake.
What's fascinating here is the core concept of selective consciousness. I mean, if we think of the sheer volume of sensory data streaming into your brain right now, the feeling of the chair you're sitting on, maybe the hum of your computer, the light.
It's overwhelming if you actually stop to notice it all.
Exactly. The brain cannot possibly process it all. So consciousness is inherently selective, right? It directs attention to only certain objects or experiences while actively filtering out extraneous stimuli.
And this selective process is what enables our highest level of mental engagement, focused awareness. This is that state of peak cognitive function high alertness, where you are wide awake, completely alert, and, totally engrossed in a task. We often associate this with flow states, I suppose.
Absolutely. Think about the application. If you're a student locked into studying a dense chapter for an exam,
Been there.
or if you're an athlete executing a really technical play, or even if you're just trying to navigate a complex interface in a video game, that is focused awareness.
Right.
This state is essential because it channels all available cognitive resources, maximizing processing power on a singular input and minimizing distraction. It's peak performance, but it's cognitively expensive. It takes a lot of energy.
And because it is so expensive, humans just can't sustain it indefinitely. Which brings us to the inevitable counterpoint. Drifting consciousness.
Yeah.
This is often just called mind wandering. It is genuinely difficult, maybe impossible, for our cognitive systems to maintain that laser focus for extended periods. The brain just needs a break.
And when the brain takes that break, it often engages in daydreaming. Daydreaming is a spontaneous form of consciousness during the waking state, where the mind just sort of wanders off task into dreamy thoughts or fantasies, or maybe just gets distracted by other stimuli.
We often think of it as unproductive, don't we? Like, stop daydreaming, focus.
Right, but studies suggest that mind wandering actually serves crucial cognitive functions. It's not just wasted time.
So what's the function then? What's the point of these mental excursions?
Well, instead of just being a waste of time, mind wandering or drifting consciousness often engages the brain's default mode network.
Okay, the DMN.
Exactly. This network is thought to be critical for things like future planning, self-reflection, and maybe even the incubation of ideas. By taking the focus off the immediate external environment, you allow internal ideas and conflicts to sort of percolate.
So it can actually be a precursor to creative problem solving. You step away, let your mind wander, and then bam, an idea hits you.
Precisely. Now let's move from drifting, which is largely involuntary, to a state we voluntarily impose upon ourselves, often, let's be honest, with negative consequences: divided consciousness.
Multitasking, the bane of modern existence for many.
Pretty much. This is the act of splitting attention across two or more tasks simultaneously.
And this is where it gets really interesting for you, the listener, because divided consciousness is everywhere. You can only successfully divide attention if at least one of the tasks is highly mechanical or automated.
Right. Think about driving a familiar route, the way you don't have to actively think about every turn.
Yeah, the route following is mechanical. Your brain puts that part on automatic pilot.
And this automatic pilot then frees up the remaining conscious capacity to focus on something else. Maybe listening intently to, Well, this deep dive.
Hopefully.
Or planning a conversation. Or, yes, checking notifications on your phone while you're doing something routine. The system only works because the mechanical task requires minimal conscious effort.
But the moment we put the mind on autopilot, we introduce that crucial risk, the major aha moment of this section, inattentional blindness.
Yes, this is the direct, often dangerous consequence of divided attention. Because our cognitive resources are fixed on the primary task, or simply split too thin, we completely fail to notice something that is physically present and often directly in front of our eyes.
The classic illustration is that gorilla experiment, right? Where people are counting basketball passes, and they totally miss a person in a gorilla suit walking right through the middle of the scene.
Exactly. And what stands out to me is that this isn't a failure of the eyes, it's a failure of attention. Your brain actively filters out that irrelevant visual information because it doesn't fit the current narrow frame of what attention is selecting.
And this has massive real-world relevance. Think of that scenario when you're driving on autopilot, deep in thought about a work problem, and you suddenly realize you've missed your exit.
Or worse.
Or worse, yeah, you fail to register a sudden traffic light change until the last second. Inattentional blindness, induced by divided consciousness, is a daily cognitive pitfall we really need to recognize. It shows that the control we think we have over our attention is highly limited and easily compromised when we try to do too much at once.
And that idea of loss of control, the automatic functions of the brain taking over, is the perfect bridge to our next section, the ultimate involuntary state of consciousness, sleep, which is fundamentally governed by these massive biological mechanisms way beyond our focus or control.
Okay, so we shift now from the voluntary control of attention to the powerful biological forces that dictate when we rest. We are talking about circadian rhythms.
Circadian rhythms are absolutely fundamental. They are not just habits. They are precise internal body processes that fluctuate according to a roughly 24-hour cycle linked to day and night.
And this powerful cycle influences way more than just when you feel sleepy or awake.
Oh, much more. These rhythmic fluctuations cover hormonal secretions, like cortisol levels spiking in the morning to wake you up and melatonin rising at night to make you sleepy, as well as core body temperature fluctuations and even blood pressure changes throughout the day. It's like an internal symphony of biological timings, keeping the body synchronized.
So where's the conductor of this symphony located?
Right in the brain. The primary regulator, the master timekeeper, is in the hypothalamus. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN.
SCN. Got it.
Yeah. The SCN is essentially a tiny bundle of nerves located just above where the optic nerves cross. Crucially, it takes input directly from the eyes regarding light and darkness.
Ah, so light is the key external cue.
It's the main one, yes. The SCN uses that light information to synchronize your internal clock with the external 24-hour world.
And how does the SCN control these rhythms? Like, what's the mechanism?
It largely controls them by regulating the release of melatonin from the pineal gland. When the SCN senses darkness, say through your eyes as evening falls, it signals the pineal gland to ramp up melatonin production.
And melatonin is like the chemical messenger of darkness.
Pretty much. It signals to the body that it's time to wind down and sleep. Conversely, when the SCN senses bright light, especially morning light, melatonin production is shut down, promoting wakefulness.
Which explains the most common and often miserable real-world disruption of this system, jet lag.
Ugh, yes. This happens when rapid travel across multiple time zones forces the local time to conflict dramatically with your body's established SCN-regulated internal clock.
And that conflict brings a very specific and predictable set of problems, doesn't it? It's not just feeling tired.
No, not at all. We see irritability, significant difficulty concentrating, impaired problem solving, and the symptoms are directional too.
Right. Traveling east, you lose time.
Exactly. You lose hours, forcing your clock to advance. So you usually struggle to fall asleep earlier than your body is ready and wake up too early.
And traveling west.
You gain hours. Your body clock thinks it should be asleep, but the local environment is still bright and active. So it's difficult to stay awake later than usual, and you might wake up too late. It's a literal battle between the external environmental cues and your internal, genetically programmed 24-hour cycle.
Okay, so that's the clock. To move beyond that and understand what actually happens during sleep, researchers rely heavily on the electroencephalograph, the EEG.
Right, the EEG is critical because it tracks brain waves, mapping them across varying states based on their amplitude, which is their height, and their frequency, their speed.
And even before we fall asleep, there are different brain wave patterns.
Yep. When you are wide awake and highly engaged, like, hopefully, focusing intensely on this deep dive right now,
Trying.
your brain is dominated by beta waves. These are fast, high-frequency, and low-amplitude waves. They reflect the busy, desynchronized electrical activity of a highly active brain.
But the moment you close your eyes and settle down, maybe meditating or just relaxing before bed,
The brain shifts. It enters a state of relaxed wakefulness characterized by alpha waves. These are slower, more rhythmic, and slightly higher in amplitude than beta waves. They signify the brain easing out of hyperalertness.
okay, so beta is alert, alpha is relaxed wakefulness. Then we actually fall asleep.
And the transition into sleep is marked by a dramatic shift in these wave patterns as we enter non-REM sleep, which actually accounts for about 75% of a typical night's rest.
Stage 1 of non-REM is the entry point, right? The lightest stage.
Exactly. Characterized by small, irregular waves. You're easily awakened, and you might even deny you were asleep if someone nudged you. This stage usually lasts only a few minutes.
Then what?
Approximately 2 minutes after stage 1, we descend into stage 2. It's a deeper stage, though you can still be readily awakened. The defining marker of stage 2 is the appearance of sleep spindles.
Sleep spindles. What are those?
They're sudden, short bursts of brainwave activity that appear against the slower background waves. It's thought these spindles might help protect sleep from external disturbances, kind of gating out noise.
Interesting. And after stage 2,
Then we sink into the truly deep, physically restorative stages. Stages 3 and 4, which we collectively call delta sleep or slow wave sleep, SWS.
and these are defined by delta waves, presumably.
You got it. They're defined by the appearance of large, slow delta waves.
What's significant about delta waves?
Well, the technical detail matters here. Delta waves are characterized by high amplitude and low frequency. The high amplitude indicates that a massive number of neurons are firing in a synchronized rhythm, signaling a deep, synchronized state of rest for the brain.
So big, slow waves mean deep rest. What's the difference between stage 3 and 4 then?
It's simply the proportion of delta waves present. Stage 4 has the highest concentration, the most delta activity. This whole SWS period is the most crucial for physical rest and bodily repair, tissue growth, that kind of thing.
All right, deep physical restoration. But then after cycling through these deep stages, maybe briefly back through stage 2, we hit something completely different. REM sleep. Rapid eye movement sleep.
Yes. And REM sleep is sometimes called active sleep or paradoxical sleep. And for good reason.
Why paradoxical?
Because the brainwave patterns on the EEG suddenly look remarkably similar to those of alert wakefulness. Beta and alpha waves become dominant again, indicating high metabolic and electrical activity, like the brain is wide awake.
But you're asleep, deeply asleep even.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the paradox. The brain looks alert, but the body is in a very different state. Muscle activity is almost completely inhibited.
Right. This leads to temporary functional paralysis. Why does that happen?
It's a critical protective mechanism. Since the vast majority of our most vivid, story-like dreams occur during REM sleep, this paralysis prevents the dreamer from physically acting out those intense dreams and potentially hurting themselves or others. It's an involuntary safety feature.
Makes sense. So why do we dedicate roughly a third of our lives to these complex cycles? What are the big functions of sleep?
The sources suggest a combination of evolutionary and biological necessities.
Okay, like what?
Well, first, there's a purely protective function. Sleep keeps the organism, particularly us daytime creatures, out of harm's way, hidden from predators during the dark hours when we're less efficient. It also conserves bodily energy.
Simple survival. What else?
The other key function is restorative. Sleep helps the body, and crucially the brain, recover from the daily wear and tear of being awake. We replenish chemical stores in the brain, clear out metabolic waste products that build up.
Like cleaning house for the brain.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But the function that holds the most immediate relevance for you, the learner, is the cognitive function.
Ah, memory.
Absolutely. Research overwhelmingly indicates that both REM sleep and the deep non-REM stages, SWS, are absolutely critical for memory consolidation.
Explain that consolidation bit.
It's the process where fragile, newly acquired information things you learn during the day is stabilized, strengthened, and locked into long-term memory networks. Deep sleep seems to help encode the factual context, while REM sleep might be more involved in refining emotional aspects and integrating those memories with existing knowledge.
So skipping sleep really messes with learning and memory.
Profoundly. Now, if we move from the function of sleep to the content of our slumber, we find ourselves debating the meaning of dreams. There are 3 major theories trying to explain what they signify.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, there's the cognitive view. The dreaming serves a function of problem solving. While we're offline, disconnected from external input, the brain continues to sort through potential solutions to everyday problems, emotional conflicts, or future concerns. It processes them symbolically or sometimes quite directly in dream narratives.
Like your brain is running simulations overnight.
Sort of, yeah. Then there's the deeply biological perspective, the activation synthesis hypothesis.
Activation synthesis. Okay.
This suggests that during the high brain activity of REM sleep, the brainstem generates basically random bursts of neural signals upwards into the cortex. The cerebral cortex, which is hardwired to seek meaning in patterns, tries its best to make sense of this chaotic random input. It synthesizes the random signals into a cohesive, if often bizarre, story or narrative.
So under this view, dreams might fundamentally be just meaningless neural noise that our higher brain imposes a story onto.
That's the core idea, yes. It's the brain trying to make sense of its own internal random activity during REM.
And of course, we have to mention the historical foundation, the Freudian view.
Can't ignore Freud when talking dreams. Sigmund Freud posited that dreams represent a form of wish fulfillment, the explicit story of the dream, what he called the manifest content.
The part you remember.
Right. That manifest content hides unconscious desires, conflicts, anxieties, the latent content. Dreams allow these unacceptable or repressed urges to be symbolically expressed in a disguised way, without disrupting sleep or waking consciousness too much.
3 very different takes on why we dream. Whatever their function, though, the cost of missing out on sleep is steep.
Extremely steep. Sleep deprivation is linked to severely impaired cognitive functions, reduced memory formation and recall, poor concentration, a really short attention span, and significantly degraded problem-solving ability.
And the consequences are far-reaching, aren't they? Not just feeling groggy.
Far from it. As a public safety issue, driver drowsiness is linked to a huge number of fatal car crashes, most frequently occurring during the early morning hours, like 2 to 5 a.m., when the body's circadian rhythm is naturally at its lowest ebb.
And it's not just the quantity of sleep either. Missing out on REM sleep specifically seems to impair learning ability and memory consolidation, especially for procedural skills like learning a new motor task.
Exactly. Finally, we should briefly categorize the common sleep-wake disorders. Insomnia is the most widely reported.
That's trouble falling asleep or staying asleep.
Yes. Chronic difficulty falling asleep, remaining asleep, or returning to sleep after waking up too early. It can be caused by all sorts of things. Physical illness, pain, genetics, underlying psychological disorders like depression or anxiety or substance abuse.
Okay, what about the more sudden sleep conditions?
We have narcolepsy. This is characterized by sudden, irresistible sleep attacks during the day. People can just fall asleep mid-sentence. These attacks can sometimes be immediately preceded by frightening, dreamlike hallucinations called hypnagogic hallucinations.
That sounds terrifying.
It can be very disruptive. And critically, there's sleep apnea. This involves the momentary stopping of breathing multiple times throughout the night.
So the person that literally stops breathing while asleep.
Yes, often hundreds of times per night for maybe 10, 20 seconds or longer each time. They usually gasp or snort awake briefly to restart breathing, but don't remember it. This results in extremely fragmented, poor quality sleep and carries serious long-term health risks due to the repeated oxygen deprivation like high blood pressure, heart problems, stroke.
Okay, important distinction there. Now, nightmares versus night terrors. People often confuse those.
Good point. Most people experience run-of-the-mill nightmares sometimes. These are unpleasant, story-like dreams usually containing threats or fear happening during REM sleep. If they become frequent, repetitive, and cause significant distress or daytime impairment, it's classified as nightmare disorder.
So nightmares are bad dreams in REM. What are night terrors?
Sleep terror disorder involves frequent, sudden episodes of intense fear during sleep, what we call night terrors. These are far more physiologically intense than typical nightmares. The person might bolt upright, scream, sweat, have a racing heart. But crucially, they occur during deep, dreamless, non-REM sleep, usually SWS, stage 3 or 4.
Not during REM.
No. And typically, the person has no memory of the event itself, just intense fear and confusion upon waking. Similarly, sleepwalking disorder involves nighttime wandering that also occurs during deep, dreamless, non-REM sleep. The sleepwalker is not acting out a dream.
Wow. So these non-REM phenomena show the brain can execute complex behaviors even when the conscious mind is completely offline.
Precisely. It highlights the separation between consciousness and complex brain function.
Okay, we've navigated the focused attention of wakefulness and the involuntary cycles of rest. Now let's explore the intentional, voluntary ways we attempt to manipulate and alter our state of consciousness, starting with non-chemical practices like meditation. These are practices where you actively try to, well, reassert control over your internal mental landscape.
Right. Meditation is essentially a highly focused process designed to induce a relaxed, contemplative state. It's a deliberate exercise in training your attention, often changing the relationship you have with your own thoughts and feelings.
The sources highlight a couple of main types. One is transcendental meditation, or TM.
In TM, the practitioner focuses their attention by silently repeating a specific, often meaningless sound or phrase known as a mantra. The goal is typically to achieve a state where thought itself is sort of transcended, leading to deep relaxation and an altered sense of awareness.
And the other big one, which has really gained immense traction in recent decades, is mindfulness meditation.
Yes, mindfulness is huge now. Instead of trying to transcend or block out thoughts, like in some TM approaches, mindfulness practitioners focus entirely on being aware of what they are sensing and feeling in the present moment.
Wow.
Thoughts, physical sensations, emotions, and observing them without judgment. Just noticing them come and go.
What's fascinating about the research on meditation, especially mindfulness, is the physical evidence showing it can actually change the brain, isn't it?
Absolutely. Studies using brain imaging, like fMRI, show that long-term mindfulness practitioners can exhibit measurable changes in brain structure. Specifically, things like increased gray matter density in areas related to attention control, emotional regulation, and self-awareness, like the prefrontal cortex and insula.
So it's direct evidence that these focused attention practices can physically restructure the brain over time. It's not just feeling calmer, it's changing the hardware.
Exactly. The sustained, focused attention required in meditation seems to help weaken the automatic connection between parts of the brain responsible for sensory processing and parts responsible for self-referential thought, rumination, and self-criticism, that default mode network we mentioned earlier.
So it helps quiet that internal chatter.
That seems to be a key mechanism, yes.
Yeah.
Which is likely why meditation can lead to greater mental calm, reduced anxiety, and better emotional resilience.
Okay, let's pivot to the second major non-chemical method, hypnosis. This is often misunderstood, I think. How is it defined scientifically?
It's defined as an altered state of consciousness, characterized by focused attention, deep relaxation, and critically, a heightened susceptibility to suggestion. That last part is key.
So it relies on the person being suggestible.
Yes, and their willingness to enter the state. When a subject is successfully guided into a hypnotic trance, a state that relies fundamentally on their ability to filter out distractions and focus inward, the hypnotist gives suggestions that can lead to genuinely unusual experiences.
Like what kind of experiences?
Well, things like hypnotic age regression, where someone might be guided to revisit childhood memories, sometimes vividly, or perhaps more scientifically validated and interesting, hypnotic analgesia.
Pain relief through hypnosis.
Yes, a powerful form of pain relief induced purely by suggestion. People undergoing surgery with hypnotic analgesia instead of chemical anesthesia, for example. It can be remarkably effective for some individuals.
And the phenomena extend to reality distortion, too.
They can. The subject might be told to perceive something that is not actually present, a positive hallucination, or conversely, to fail to perceive something that is present, like not seeing an object right in front of them, a negative hallucination.
Wow. Are there effects after the hypnosis session?
Yes, there are related phenomena that occur outside the trance state itself. Post-hypnotic amnesia is when the subject can't recall what happened while they were hypnotized, usually following a specific suggestion from the hypnotist to forget.
And the opposite?
The opposite, or perhaps a different application, is a post-hypnotic suggestion. This is an idea or instruction planted by the hypnotist for the person to respond to in a certain way after they emerge from the trance state. Like, when you hear me snap my fingers later, you'll feel an urge to stand up.
Okay, so the nature of hypnosis itself is highly debated, right? There are competing theories about why it works.
Very much so. This leads to two major competing theories. The first is more of a psychological or social explanation, the role-playing model.
Role-playing, so it's not a real altered state.
According to this model, no. It posits that the subject isn't actually in a unique altered state of consciousness. Instead, they are highly motivated and adopt the social role of a good hypnotic subject. They willingly follow the hypnotist's suggestions because they believe this is what's expected of them in that context, and they want to cooperate or experience what they think hypnosis should be.
So it's about expectation and social compliance in this view.
Essentially, yes. But then we circle back to our very first section on divided consciousness, thanks to the neo-dissociation theory proposed by Ernest Hilgard.
Neo-dissociation. That sounds more like a genuine split in consciousness.
That's exactly what Hilgard argued. This theory suggests that hypnosis is a genuine, non-ordinary state, representing a form of dissociated or divided consciousness.
How does that work? A split.
Hilgard suggested that during hypnosis, the mind splits into two separate streams of awareness. One part, the conscious part that communicates, follows the suggestions of the hypnotist, but another part, which he famously termed the hidden observer, remains aware of reality, including things the hypnotized part is ignoring, like pain during analgesia, but it's disconnected from the executive control or reporting function.
A hidden observer.
That's
This is fascinating. So it's like a protective yet deeply unconscious form of mental partitioning.
That's the idea. And this connection is really vital, as it links the intentional alteration of hypnosis back to the more mundane, involuntary mental splitting we experience every single time we try to multitask or operate on automatic pilot. It suggests dissociation might be a more common mental mechanism than we think.
All right, we move now from the, let's say, subtle alterations achieved through focused thought and suggestion to the powerful, often overwhelming effects of chemistry. We're talking about psychoactive drugs.
Yes, substances that act directly on the brain to fundamentally affect our emotional and mental states, our mood, perception, thought processes, and behavior.
And this is a massive category, right? It includes legal stuff like alcohol and nicotine.
Right, prescription medications, and of course illicit substances like heroin, cocaine, LSD, and so on. The concept of drug misuse is crucial here.
How is misuse defined?
It's defined as any maladaptive or dangerous use that causes or aggravates personal problems, occupational issues, or health problems. It's using a drug in a way that creates negative consequences.
And when individuals misuse multiple drugs simultaneously?
They're known as polyabusers, which unfortunately complicates treatment and increases risks significantly.
Okay. Drug misuse often spirals into drug dependence, which sounds more serious.
It is. Dependence is characterized by an impaired control over use. The most severe form involves physiological dependence. This means there's been a physical change in the body's chemistry resulting from repeated drug exposure. The body has adapted to the presence of the substance and needs it to function normally.
And physiological dependence leads to?
Two predictable and often difficult phenomena. First, tolerance. This is the need to increase the amount of the drug over time just to achieve the same initial effect the user first experienced. The body adapts, the effect diminishes at the same dose.
Okay. Needing more for the same high, what's the second?
The really tough one. Withdrawal syndrome, sometimes called abstinence syndrome. This is the cluster of painful and sometimes dangerous physical and psychological symptoms experienced when a physiologically dependent person abruptly stops using the drug or cuts back drastically. The body is essentially protesting the absence of the drug it adapted to.
And when dependence involves tolerance and withdrawal, plus that feeling of powerlessness over use, that's when we call it addiction.
Generally, yes. Addiction usually implies drug dependence accompanied by those clear physiological dependent signs, along with compulsive drug-seeking behavior despite negative consequences. However, we also must account for psychological dependence.
How is that different?
Psychological dependence is where the user feels a compulsive or habitual need for the drug, primarily to satisfy a psychological craving, often using it to cope with stress, anxiety, depression, or just to feel normal or escape reality, even if severe physical withdrawal symptoms might be absent for that particular drug or pattern of use.
So the craving and compulsion can exist without the harsh physical withdrawal.
Exactly. And this concept of compulsive psychological use is why certain behaviors that lack chemical components like pathological gambling, compulsive shopping, or even increasingly the excessive use of technology are sometimes likened to non-chemical addiction.
Right. The sources mention concern over internet addiction, IA.
They do, though it's important to note it remains categorized as a compulsive behavior pattern and isn't yet a formal, standalone diagnosable disorder in the main psychiatric manuals, so that's debated.
Okay, let's break down the drug categories, starting with depressants. These reduce central nervous system activity. Right?
Correct. They slow down heart rate, respiration, brain activity, and often induce a feeling of relaxation or sedation.
And the most common one globally is alcohol.
By far. It's an intoxicant that rapidly clouds judgment, impairs concentration and attention, and significantly reduces the ability to weigh consequences accurately. Alcohol works primarily by enhancing the effects of the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter, GABA, essentially calming down neural firing.
When chemical dependence involves impaired control and physiological reliance on alcohol, we call that alcoholism.
Correct. And related to alcohol misuse is the serious public health threat of binge drinking.
What's the definition of binge drinking again?
It's typically defined as consuming 5 or more standard drinks for men or 4 or more for women on a single occasion, usually within about 2 hours. This pattern is associated with acute risks like accidents and injuries, poor academic or work performance, and a significantly higher propensity for developing long-term dependence issues.
Okay. What other CNS depressants are common?
Well, historically, barbiturates were widely used, also tranquilizers. These are sedatives designed to calm the nervous system, often prescribed for sleep or anxiety in the past.
But they're dangerous.
Highly addictive and extremely dangerous, especially when combined with alcohol. The synergistic depressant effects can easily cause fatal respiratory failure. Breathing just stops. Modern benzodiazepines like Valium or Xanax, used for anxiety and insomnia, generally have a wider safety margin than barbiturates, but still carry a substantial risk of tolerance, dependence, and addiction if misused or used long-term.
And opioids fit here too.
Yes, opioids or narcotics drugs like heroin, morphine, oxycodone, fentanyl are also CNS depressants, though primarily known for their powerful pain-relieving and euphoria-inducing properties. They are, of course, highly addictive.
Okay, moving to the opposite extreme, stimulants. These activate the central nervous system.
Right, they increase energy, alertness, attention, and physiological activity like heart rate and blood pressure.
A prime example being amphetamines.
Yes, these are synthetic drugs that strongly activate the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight response. You get measurable increases in heart rate, blood pressure, respiration.
And their effects depend on the dose.
Very much so. At low therapeutic doses, like those used for ADHD, they can effectively boost alertness, concentration, and dramatically reduce feelings of fatigue.
But at higher doses.
That's where the misuse potential comes in. High doses induce an intense, often euphoric rush, followed by a potential crash. Common forms include amphetamine sulfate, speed, methamphetamine, meth, crystal, and dextroamphetamine.
Now, for a bit of history, let's talk cocaine. It's a natural stimulant.
Yes, derived from the leaves of the coca plant, native to South America.
And it actually has a surprising history with consumer products.
It does. Famously, back in 1886, when Coca-Cola was first introduced, the original formula actually contained a significant amount of cocaine. It was openly marketed as the ideal brain tonic.
Wow. Times have changed.
Indeed. The company now uses only a non-psychoactive extract from the coca leaf for flavoring. But the history is a fascinating testament to the shifting cultural acceptance and understanding of stimulant use.
How does cocaine work in the brain? What makes it so powerfully rewarding?
Cocaine itself can be ingested in various forms. Sniffed as powder, smoked as crack cocaine, which is faster acting, injected, or even brewed as tea in some cultures. Its profound mechanism of action is a really critical neurochemical insight. Cocaine produces its intense pleasure primarily by activating the brain's reward pathways, mainly by blocking the reuptake of the neurotransmitter dopamine in the synapse.
Okay, break that down. Blocking reuptake.
So normally, after dopamine is released by one neuron to send a signal across the synapse, the gap between neurons, to the next neuron, it's quickly vacuumed back up by the original neuron through transporter proteins. This process is called reuptake, and it terminates the signal.
Right.
Cocaine physically blocks those dopamine transporter proteins, so the dopamine can't get vacuumed back up. It stays in the synapse much longer, continuing to stimulate the receiving neuron over and over again.
Ah, so it keeps the pleasure signal firing for longer and more intensely.
Exactly. This continuous stimulation of the brain's natural reward circuit generates the intense, often overwhelming feeling of euphoria associated with cocaine use. It hijacks the system.
Okay, moving to another synthetic compound, MDMA, known as ecstasy or Molly.
Yes. This drug is chemically related to amphetamines, but also has some hallucinogenic properties. It produces effects like mild euphoria, increased empathy or sociability, and altered sensory perception. It affects multiple neurotransmitter systems, notably serotonin and dopamine.
Often seen as a party drug, but are there long-term risks?
Definitely. Heavy or chronic use is linked to serious, potentially long-lasting consequences. These can include undesirable psychological effects like depression, chronic anxiety, paranoia, memory problems, and even in some cases, persistent psychosis. Furthermore, repeated exposure is linked to measurable cognitive deficits, particularly impairing memory, learning ability, and attention, possibly due to damage to serotonin pathways.
Next up, nicotine. Found in tobacco, obviously. Classified as a stimulant, but...
Yeah. A mild stimulant, but one with exceptional addictive power. Dependence can begin astonishingly quickly, sometimes within weeks of initial, even intermittent use.
What are its main effects?
Nicotine increases heart rate and blood pressure, suppresses appetite, and clearly enhances arousal, alertness, and concentration, which is part of its appeal.
But the sources mention a key paradoxical effect.
Yes. Despite being a CNS stimulant physiologically, many users report that nicotine also reliably induces feelings of relaxation or mental calmness. This might be partly due to relieving withdrawal symptoms in dependent users, but it also seems to have inherent calming effects for some, perhaps by modulating other neurotransmitter systems. This dual action, stimulating yet calming, is likely a major factor driving its highly addictive nature.
Fascinating. And finally, the stimulant almost everyone uses. Caffeine.
Absolutely. The most widely used psychoactive drug in the world by a massive margin, found in coffee, tea, cola drinks, chocolate, energy drinks.
Does it lead to dependence?
Yes, regular use definitely leads to physiological dependence. You know this if you've ever skipped your morning coffee and felt that characteristic headache, fatigue, and irritability, classic caffeine withdrawal.
Is it generally safe?
In moderation, generally yes for most adults. Heavy use can lead to tolerance, where you need more for the same effect, and functional dependence, where users feel they only function normally after having caffeine. They don't feel truly stimulated anymore, just brought up to baseline. High doses can cause anxiety, jitters, insomnia. Pregnant women are usually advised to limit intake.
Okay, our final category. Hallucinogens, sometimes called psychedelics.
All right. These drugs primarily act to fundamentally alter sensory perceptions. They produce hallucinations, seeing, hearing, or feeling things that aren't there, or major distortions in existing sensory input.
What kind of experience do they produce?
It can range wildly. They might induce feelings of relaxation, euphoria, spiritual insight for some users, or trigger intense anxiety, paranoia, and terrifying panic in others. The context, mindset, and dose are hugely important.
Do they cause dependence like stimulants or depressants?
Interestingly, classic hallucinogens like LSD or psilocybin are generally not known to produce significant physiological dependence. There isn't a harsh physical withdrawal syndrome like with alcohol or opioids.
But people can still get hooked psychologically.
Yes, users can definitely develop a strong psychological dependence. They might use the drugs compulsively, perhaps to cope with stress, escape reality, or repeatedly seek a particular kind of altered experience, even if it causes problems in their lives.
LSD, or acid, is probably the most famous one.
Yes, one of the most potent hallucinogens known. It produces vivid, often bizarre or profound, hallucinations and sensory distortions. An LSD trip can last for up to 12 hours or even longer.
Are there physical effects?
Yes, things like pupil dilation, increased heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, and sweating, but the primary risks are psychological.
The infamous bad trip.
Exactly. These involve intense anxiety, terrifying panic attacks, and sometimes acute psychotic reactions, including severe paranoia, delusions of persecution, or a complete break from reality that can be dangerous.
We should probably also acknowledge the historical and traditional context for some hallucinogens.
Absolutely. Substances like mescaline from the peyote cactus and psilocybin from certain types of mushrooms have been used for centuries, perhaps millennia, for religious, spiritual, and healing purposes by various indigenous cultures, particularly Native American groups, in controlled ritual settings.
What about synthetic hallucinogens?
On the synthetic side, PCP, phencyclidine, or angel dust is a particularly dangerous gig. It's often classified as a dissociative anesthetic, but produces hallucinogenic effects. Critically, it often causes delirium.
Delirium. What does that entail?
A state of acute mental confusion characterized by excitement, agitation, disorientation, incoherence, and extreme difficulty focusing or sustaining attention. Users can become violent or completely detached from reality. It's very unpredictable.
Lastly, let's talk about marijuana from the cannabis plant.
Right. The primary psychoactive chemical responsible for most of its effects is THC, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol.
What are its typical effects?
At lower doses, it commonly produces mild euphoria, relaxation, altered time perception, and heightened sensory experiences like colors seeming brighter or music sounding richer.
But higher doses can be different.
Yes. At high doses, or in individuals who are susceptible or inexperienced, marijuana can significantly alter perceptions in unpleasant ways. It can lead to anxiety, paranoia, disorientation, nausea, panic attacks, and sometimes true hallucinations, particularly with potent strains or edibles. Long-term heavy use is also linked to potential risks like cognitive impairment, respiratory issues if smoked, and possibly triggering or worsening certain mental health conditions in vulnerable individuals.
Okay, so looking at this whole landscape of substance misuse, what are the underlying causes? It seems complex.
Extremely complex. The sources point to it spanning multiple domains. First, sociocultural factors. These include things like age group norms, employment status, overall cultural attitudes towards drug use, peer pressure, and even religious, ethnic, or racial differences in use patterns and risks.
Then there are biological factors?
Yes, biological factors. Genetics play a role. Some people might inherit a predisposition that makes them more vulnerable to developing dependence. Differences in individual brain chemistry, like neurotransmitter levels or receptor sensitivity, or how quickly a person metabolizes a drug, can also influence vulnerability. The structure and function of the brain's reward pathways are key here.
And finally, psychological factors.
Critically important. Psychological factors often involve issues like pre-existing mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, trauma, where individuals might turn to substances to self-medicate, trying to temporarily relieve emotional pain, numb feelings, or escape from pressing life problems. Low self-esteem, poor coping skills, sensation-seeking traits can also contribute. Drugs become a temporary but ultimately maladaptive coping mechanism.
Given this complexity, treatment for substance misuse must also be multifaceted, right?
Absolutely. A single approach rarely works. Treatment typically needs to be multimodal. It often involves an initial detoxification phase to safely manage withdrawal and clear the drugs from the system, usually under medical supervision.
But detox isn't enough on its own.
Not at all. That's just the first step. Robust psychological counseling, individual therapy, group therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is essential to help individuals understand the underlying reasons for their misuse, develop healthier coping strategies, and address co-occurring mental health issues.
What about support groups?
Self-help programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, or Narcotics Anonymous, NA, are incredibly important for many people, providing crucial peer support, shared experience, accountability, and a structured program for recovery.
And sometimes medication is part of treatment too.
Yes, often therapeutic drugs are used, combined with counseling. These might include medications to manage cravings, like naltrexone for alcohol or opioids, reduce withdrawal symptoms, like methadone or buprenorphine for opioid dependence, or treat underlying psychiatric conditions. The combination of medication and therapy is often the most effective approach for moderate to severe dependence. #outro.
Well, we have definitely completed our navigation of the mental landscape today, tracing the entire arc of awareness, it feels like.
It's been quite a journey.
We started with the precision required for focused attention, examined the dangerous cognitive cost of divided attention in that automatic pilot mode, delved into the complex involuntary stages of biological rest governed by the SCN and our circadian rhythms, and finally looked at the intentional manipulation of consciousness through both contemplation, like meditation, and powerful chemistry with psychoactive drugs.
And understanding these concepts, hopefully, gives you, the listener, immediate applicable insights. How to maybe optimize your performance through focused awareness, how to respect your circadian rhythm when traveling, and recognizing those cognitive pitfalls, like inattentional blindness or the profound impact of sleep deprivation on learning and memory.
So what does this all mean for the modern learner? Here's a final thought. We established early on that when we multitask or let our mind drift while doing something routine, we enter a state of divided consciousness. One part of the mind on autopilot, the other may be vaguely conscious.
Right.
We later saw that the neo-dissociation theory suggests hypnosis is also a state of divided consciousness, a dissociation that makes a person highly susceptible to external suggestion.
Okay, see where you're going.
So, given how often we, as modern, highly connected learners, operate in a state of self-induced, divided consciousness, driving while listening to an ad, folding laundry while scrolling through a potentially manipulative social media feed, how susceptible are we really to continuous, perhaps unconscious external suggestion in our day-to-day lives? Without ever realizing, we've entered a mild yet potentially powerfully suggestible mental state of divided attention.
That's a provocative thought indeed. It encourages us to scrutinize that mental autopilot we rely on so heavily, and maybe question what inputs are slipping in when we're not fully present. Until next time, keep digging into the sources and questioning what you think you see, or maybe what you don't see.
We'll see you for the next deep dive.